And now we're going to have our main speaker here. I was in touch with Dr. Jackson, Dr. Lester Jackson, several months ago, and we started arranging this, and I really didn't understand, what his message was. But I've come to, realize that this is a very, very profound message about equal justice under the law. Dr. Jackson wrote this book, and it's for sale. You can get a copy after the meeting. And he writes that it says equal justice under the law on the Supreme Court. But it's not equal justice for victims. It's equal justice. It's justice for murderers and criminals. And, we're going to be enlightened. Dr. Jackson is a writer. He's a former college professor. He writes numerous articles about capital punishment, the Supreme Court, and American politics. So let's welcome Dr. Jackson to the Queens Village Republican Club.
While I'm talking, I don't need it. If they ask me questions, I need it.
Okay.
I'm a little hard of hearing, so if I'm talking too loud, let me know. Okay? Now, the first thing I want to say is how happy I am to be in front of an audience that is not only Republican, but also conservative. People often ask me, am I a Republican or a Democrat? I say I'm not a Republican or a Democrat, I'm a conservative. And that's what I am. Can you imagine I come from Brooklyn, of all places, and I'm conservative? But, I don't know if you know, but David Horowitz was what is known as a red diaper baby. But I was trained to think for myself. And I believe in evaluating evidence. Anyway, without further ado, I want to say, what do I mean by equal justice? In the United States of America today, the life of a murderer is worth 99.83% of the life of a victim. A murderer has a 99.83% chance of not losing his own life. Compare that with what Margaret Thatcher said. Margaret Thatcher said, no one should go out prepared to take a life of another human being without forfeiting his own life. But that's not the way it is. The Supreme Court, the ruling class, the values murderers' lives at far more than 584 times the life of a murderer. A woman I know in California named Cheryl Plato, whose daughter, a beautiful, talented young woman, was murdered mercilessly. She pointed out to me, not only does a murderer take the life of his victim, he takes the life of all the children and grandchildren and progeny of that victim. So it's far more havoc that a murderer causes. By the same token, the life of a victim is worth 0.17% the life of a murderer. How do I get this figure? Very simple. In the United States of America, in the last 47 years, there has been a Holocaust, a virtual Holocaust of 870,000 murders. Now, that's a wholesale slaughter. If you go to Wikipedia, you will find that many genocides are listed that have far less than 870,000 victims. So this is a real tragedy in this country. And not only do the victims lose their lives. But then the courts proceed to torture the traumatized families for decades. How many people in here have ever heard of John Jacob Dugan? In 1974, he got a hold of a 18-year-old boy and cut his throat and shot him. And he wasn't content with that. He made an audio tape, which he sent to the media and to the boy's mother, saying how much he enjoyed seeing the blood gushing from the throat and eyes of that poor boy. Why is this case still going on in 2019? This man is now in his late 60s, if not 70. The boy had only 18 years. This is equal justice? I don't think so. Now, how did I get to this figure? Very important. I haven't studied the last 2 years, but between 1972 and 2014, there was something like 815,000 murders and 1,300 executions. Do the math. How many murders result in an execution? It's tragic. Now the question is, why? And what can be done about it? All too often, I have seen people get rich by making other people angry at what's going on. I have proposed a solution in my book. The solution is, first of all, you have to understand where the problem lies. It lies in the defiance of public opinion. And that is profound, because there's a professor at Ohio State University named Douglas Berman. Professor Berman said, how is it that with a vast majority of the public supporting capital punishment, that punishment has been virtually eliminated in this country? Right. And he said, I have to conclude that the people who oppose capital punishment are far more passionate and motivated than the people who support it. Right. I have interviewed many victims, survivors actually, but they're also victims. I've never had the heart to ask them, did you support capital punishment before you lost your daughter, or before you lost your husband or parents? I don't think so. Nobody cares until it hits them. By the way, there is a delusion rampant in the land that there is a debate between capital punishment supporters and capital punishment opponents. It is impossible to oppose capital punishment. It is impossible to oppose capital punishment for one reason. In the last 47 years, 17,000 people have been murdered by previously convicted murderers. So all these people who are so hot and bothered about how terrible it is to take a life of a murderer, all they're doing is sentencing to death, in place of that murderer, the next victims of spared murderers. The issue is not whether there shall be capital punishment. The issue is whether it shall be administered to murderers, those convicted of intentional murder, or those who are innocent, law-abiding, decent people going about their business. So that's an important point. Now, how is this? What has to be done? What has to be done is the Supreme Court of the United States has to be exposed lock, stock, and barrel for the bunch of charlatans they are. They are nothing but a bunch of dishonest frauds who have virtually destroyed the United States Constitution. We no longer have federalism in this country. The federal government's on its way to tyranny. And I just have to say one thing. If people don't wake up soon, the fanatics on the left, who have nothing better to do apparently, but make mischief and destroy the country, they are going to prevail over all the decent, law-abiding citizens who want nothing more than to go about their daily lives and be left alone. But they're not going to leave you alone. They're never going to leave you alone. And when a murderer they protect strikes you, forget it. Let me give you an example of how dishonest these judges are. How many people in this room know that there is a constitutional right, according to the Supreme Court, to commit rape and even murder and other violence without any punishment at all? And this right is bestowed upon the most depraved human beings among us. There was a case decided in 1977. It was called Coca versus Georgia. Everyone should read that case. This fellow, Ehrlich Anthony Coca, was already serving a life sentence for robbery, rape, attempted murder, and successful murder. So he escapes from jail, and he promptly goes and finds this young woman 3 weeks after giving birth, and he rapes her and says he's going to kill her if she doesn't cooperate, and he's going to kill her husband. The Supreme Court says no death penalty for rape. And what's more, in one of the most infamous lines in the history of the Supreme Court, it said, Mrs. Carver was unharmed. Now, how can anybody be raped and be unharmed? Well, it's very simple. Now, could it be that the guy who wrote the opinion, who happened to be Justice Byron White, maybe he had a poor choice of words? Most people do not know something about the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, before it issues any opinion, circulates opinions to every justice. And every justice reads every other justice's opinion, including dissents. And Chief Justice Joe Berger wrote a dissent in which he said the distinction between harmful and unharmful rape eludes my comprehension. So it's not like Byron White didn't know what he was writing, or it was a poor choice of words in a bad moment. He knew there was an objection. But that's not the end of the case. Since you can't punish Coca for rape, because he's already serving a life, you can't give him the death sentence. If you can't give the death sentence to someone already serving a life sentence because he's such a depraved human being, there's no punishment.
Right.
court, New York State, where the highest court in the state ruled the death penalty of the state was unconstitutional. And he said openly to the judge, "You can't do ST to me." I'm not going to say it here. But he said, "You can't do nothing to me. I can do anything I want. I got so much time coming, you can't do nothing to me." And he took a female prison guard named Donna Paya, who was a local resident who needed a job, a 31-year-old mother. He not only raped her, bit her nipples off,
Don't get so
he
dismissive.
also put her in a garbage compactor to be compacted into a cube. The workers found her body before putting her in the compactor. Otherwise, there would have been no tracer. And he couldn't be punished for that. He can do whatever he wants. He can't be punished. When you keep murderers alive, you are condemning additional people to death who have never harmed anyone. So the question then becomes, what do you do about it? Again, you have to expose what a bunch of charlatans, these arrogant charlatans these judges are. Now, let's go back to Coker versus Georgia. They did 4 things in that case. They distinguished between harmful and unharmful rape, saying this was not a particularly harmful rape. Yeah, you tell that to Mrs. Carver. They also said that you can't have the death penalty for rape. It's not a serious enough crime. Well, you tell that to some women. I mean, it's one thing, well, I won't say it, but there are different types of women, and some of them take it a lot harder than others. Some have ended up in mental institutions, and that's a serious matter. And so, that's number 2. Number 3, the court said that in the end, and this is a direct quote, in the end, the Constitution contemplates that our independent judgment shall be brought to bear on the acceptability of a punishment. Whereupon, in 2008, Justice Scalia said, the framers of the Constitution would have scornfully laughed at the notion that 5 lawyers on the Supreme Court have the right to decide whether the punishments decided by 300 million people are acceptable. That's not what the Constitution's about. Not at all. And every time I've read that Coker, and by the way, Chief Justice Burger also pointed out, if you cannot inflict the death penalty on Coker, it is hard to see how we can protect ourselves from the most depraved human beings in our midst. And essentially, the court created a right to commit punishment-free violence for the most depraved individuals, because they cannot be punished further for any additional crime. If you can't take a man's life away after he's already serving a life sentence, you can't punish him. He gets to commit punishment-free crime as often he can get away with it. Now, is there anything that can be done? Well, I think applying the rules of politics, the people who are victims have to organize. I tried to form an organization called Equal Justice for Victims. I couldn't even raise $20,000. That's pathetic, just pathetic. And I think, frankly, Ronald Reagan once said, "Our country is never more than one generation away from the extinction of freedom." If people in this country are going to sit back and do nothing, you know, there's so much that can be done. Do you know how much power Congress has? I remember the 2010 election. In 2010, I saw a hearing of the Rules Committee, and Steve King of Iowa said he wanted to cut off funds for Obamacare. After all, that's why the public gave the Republicans control of the House. People do not know how powerful the appropriations power is. No money may be spent from the Treasury except as it's appropriated by Congress. Congress, that means compare the president's veto power. The president has the power to veto a bill, and Congress can overturn that veto by 2/3. However, one House of Congress, a majority of one House of Congress, a majority of the House of Representatives can cut off funds, refuse to appropriate funds. What are you going to do? Veto a non-act? You can't veto if they don't act. Most people don't know this. Congress has enormous power over the courts. The Congress creates the inferior courts. Article 3 of the Constitution gives Congress power over the appellate jurisdiction of the courts. Congress could tomorrow pass a law saying the Supreme Court, having abused its authority, shall never again get to review any death sentence. And there are so many things Congress can do. But here's the fly in the ointment. Congress is made up of a bunch of pussycats. Self-interested pussycats. Most of them do not care about anything other than themselves.
Maybe have some questions.
What's that?
Questions, we won't have time for
Well,
questions.
I guess the clock is running out. Okay, let me just say, one other thing. So, Congress does not exercise its power. And it's never going to exercise its power unless the public is informed about some of the things I've just mentioned, which I tried to do, but I've been banging my head against the wall. People are disorganized. The thing about the left, did you ever notice the Supreme Court? The Supreme Court, the liberals, always stick together on every major case. The conservatives go off in other directions. I'm telling you, Gorsuch, Roberts has already shown himself to be a fake. By the way, Roberts has declared war on the safety of the American people. People don't know that. Not only is the death penalty unconstitutional according to them, in most cases, you can't even sentence a juvenile to life without parole. That's Roberts. Twice. Then you got Neil Gorsuch. Oh, how Trump sings about Neil Gorsuch. The first major decision he made, Sessions versus DeMaio. Gorsuch said that Jesse DeMaio was so bad, even Obama wanted to deport him. The case started out as Lynch versus DeMaio, under Loretta Lynch, the Attorney General. But then Sessions took over, became Sessions versus DeMaio. This guy's DeMaio committed 2 burglaries. And Gorsuch said, It was not clear that burglary poses a threat of violence. Are you kidding me? Did he ever hear of Sean Taylor, a star football player for the Washington Redskins, on his way to the Hall of Fame? Comes home in the middle of a burglary, is shot to death. That's the end of his career. 24 years old.
You want to take some questions?
Okay, I'm being asked questions. Anybody have any questions? If I only ask that you speak loudly, and I'm going to put on my little hearing amplifier so I can hear you. Just give me 1 second. Yeah. Whoops. Yeah.
Is the death penalty a deterrent?
Oh, can you talk a little louder, please?
I said, is the death penalty a deterrent?
Is the death penalty a deterrent?
Is the death penalty a deterrent? Deterrent.
Does it deter?
I'll give you 2 answers to that.
Okay.
First of all, when a murderer knows that he has a 99.83% chance of not being executed,
That's right.
that's no deterrent. There is no death penalty. Effective. I mean, there's a few token ones. And secondly, that's besides the point. The guy you execute is deterred for good. If you had executed all people convicted of first-degree murder in the last 47 years, you would have saved 17,000 innocent lives.
If not more.
Say that again?
If not more.
If not more. Plus all the progeny. Yes. Go ahead.
You said that you're a conservative. You said you're a conservative from Brooklyn.
Yes.
So I believe that the Conservative Party is only in the state of New York. Is that right?
Say it again?
Is the Conservative Party only in the state of New York? It is.
It's
It is.
insignificant.
Well, I mean, I'm just wondering.
State of New York, if I were younger, I'd get the hell out of here as fast as I like. This, you know, one day, I was at Brooklyn College, and I go to a bathroom, and it says, this single-use bathroom may be used by persons of all genders. I said, all genders? How many genders are there? Even transgenders want to go from man to woman or woman to man. How many genders are there? It turns out my tax dollars and your tax dollars was spent so that some bureaucrat could compile a list of 31 genders. Go to Google, type in 31 genders, New York City, and the document, the official New York City government document, will pop up saying how much trouble you can get into if you discriminate against any one of these 31 genders. Are you kidding me? This state is nuts.
Nuts.
I'd get the hell out of here as fast as I could if I were younger.
That's why we have the Republican Patriots here.
Well,
We're going to change things.
tell me when they kick the Democrats out of office.
That's what we're going to do.
When I see it, I'll believe it. Right now, what I see is the people on the left are absolutely fanatics.
Right.
And
So
the people on the right are basically asleep at the switch. And the freedom in this country is being eroded and eroded and eroded. And when I see it, I'll believe it. Yes, anybody else? I know most of you have watched Law and Order. And every week almost, there's a motion to suppress evidence. It's called the exclusionary rule. This rule was not even applied to the federal government until 1914. They tried to get it adopted by the Supreme Court to the states in 1948. The Supreme Court refused. In 1961, by a 5-4 vote, they applied it to the states. They advertised the exclusionary rule as saying that's the only way you can get the police to behave themselves. and not violate the law. Granted, there are some police who abuse their authority. However, just consider what the exclusionary rule is. If the police get a bad tip and break into your house by mistake, what do you have? They're not going to find evidence of drugs already or guilt of any sort. So you can only sue them, which means you sue their employers, the taxpayers. However, only criminals get the added benefit of having reliable evidence proving their guilt, excluded, and they go free. As Judge Benjamin Cardozo pointed out, the criminal goes free because the constable blundered. And the exclusionary rule illustrates more than anything how the Supreme Court bends over backwards to protect criminals. This is a right that protects criminals and only criminals, because only criminals can benefit from the exclusion of evidence that they are guilty of a crime.
Right. I think you're terrific.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lester is going to publish something on our website in the near future to elaborate and put some of the documents that he talked about tonight, so we could see like actual proof of some of the statements he made are really, true statements.
Oh.
So
It's very descriptive.
let's thank Dr. Jackson again. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Great lecture.